We hadn't really been married for a while. Not in any way that mattered. We shared a house, a mortgage, some furniture, and the silence that lives between two people who once loved each other but forgot how. There were no fights, no affairs, not that I knew of, just a steady erosion. It started with small things, her going to bed earlier, her texting at dinner, her smiles reserved for strangers and her sighs saved for me. By the time I saw the Facebook post, our marriage was already hollowed out. But that didn't make it hurt any less. It was a weeknight. I was sitting in the living room with my laptop, doing nothing in particular, just passing time the way lonely men do, scrolling through news, weather, old friends' updates. I don't even remember why I checked her page. Maybe I was curious. Maybe I was hoping to feel something. Then I saw it. A black and white quote card with white text in Swedish. I had to click "See translation" to understand it. I have no obligation to satisfy a man. Just like that. No caption, no context. Public. Dozens of likes. Hearts. Laughing faces. Comments cheering her on. Yes, queen clapping hands. This. You don't owe him anything, nail polish. My therapist says the same thing, lol. Some of them were our mutual friends. A few were coworkers. One was her cousin. Another, my former boss's wife. They all saw it. Read it. And clapped. I stared at the screen, not sure what I was supposed to feel. The quote itself wasn't what cut me, I'm not that fragile. What got me was that it had come from her, from my wife, and that she wanted people to see it. Wanted them to know what she thought of me. Not directly, of course. That would require courage. This was her way, distant and performative, dressed up as empowerment. That night, I said nothing. The next morning at work, I could feel it. The weight of eyes. The careful pauses in conversation. The way people smiled too much, or not at all. I overheard two coworkers whispering in the break room. Something about that post, and damn, that's rough. They didn't say my name, but they didn't have to. She'd made it known, her husband was not a man to be respected. He was someone to be pitied, or mocked. That evening, I sat across from her at the dinner table, our plates separated by a gulf of emotional rot. I asked her, without drama, what the post was about. She laughed. Not nervously. Not apologetically. Just casually, the way you laugh at someone who doesn't get the joke. She said it was nothing. Just a quote she saw and liked. People post things all the time. I shouldn't take it so seriously. But I did. Not because I was sensitive, but because she wasn't. Because after everything I'd quietly given her, this was what she wanted the world to see. That she owed me nothing. That was the moment I knew we weren't going to recover. Not because of what she said, but because she believed it. She believed there were no consequences for treating a husband like a punching bag in front of a cheering audience. And maybe there weren't. But that night, something shifted in me. Not with shouting, not with rage, just a quiet decision. If I meant nothing to her, then I'd stop giving everything. There was no fight. No scene. No slammed doors. Just a decision. That night, after she dismissed the post as nothing, I went to bed without brushing my teeth. I stared at the ceiling in the dark, listening to her type on her phone beside me. Probably texting one of the friends who'd applauded her. Probably basking in that small, addicting glow of attention. I didn't speak. I just lay there, staring into the nothing that had become our marriage, and for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Not the soft kind. Not relief. Just a kind of hard, clear silence inside me. Like the moment before glass shatters. The next morning, I woke up early. Earlier than her, which used to be rare. I didn't make her coffee like I used to. I didn't leave a banana and a granola bar on the counter like I had every weekday for the last 4 years. I just got dressed, grabbed my keys, and left. That was the beginning. I didn't tell her what I was doing. I didn't announce anything. I simply stopped making her life easier. At work, I kept my head down and my mouth shut. That helped. People eventually moved on. Or maybe they just forgot. Scandals fade fast when there's no follow-up. And I gave them nothing. After lunch, I walked into a gym I hadn't set foot in since my 20s. It smelled like rubber and sweat and effort. I signed up for a 1-year membership and told myself, 30 minutes a day. That's it. Not for her. Not for anyone. Just to remember what it felt like to have a body. That night, she asked if I could help her figure out her insurance renewal, something I'd done every year since we got married. I told her I didn't know the password anymore. I wasn't rude. I wasn't short. I was calm. Unmoved. And that seemed to unsettle her more than anything. The next day, she left a list of errands on the kitchen counter. I saw it when I grabbed my keys. Read through it. Folded it in half. Left it on the table. Not out of spite. Just as a message. I'm not your assistant. Not your fixer. Not your quiet little loyalist. You said you don't owe me anything. Message received. Within a week, the dynamic changed. She didn't speak much. Started tiptoeing around me in the mornings, avoiding eye contact. Not because she felt guilty, I don't think guilt was part of her vocabulary, but because she could feel the shift. I'd stopped orbiting her. I had pulled my gravity back. She asked if I was upset. I said I wasn't. And I wasn't, not in the traditional sense. I wasn't angry. I wasn't brooding. I wasn't lying awake imagining revenge. I just didn't care anymore. And when a man truly stops caring, not performatively, not as a tactic, but deep in his bones, something irreversible happens. He stops trying. I started going for walks after dinner. Alone. No phone. No dog. Just the sound of my shoes on pavement and the realization that I didn't miss being at home. That being away from her didn't feel like absence, it felt like clarity. I withdrew financially too. Quietly. Set up a new savings account in my name only. Redirected a percentage of my paycheck into it. I didn't hide it. I just stopped sharing. She noticed eventually. I could tell from the way she hovered around the kitchen counter, staring at bank statements that no longer made complete sense to her. But she didn't ask. Maybe she knew. Maybe she was afraid to know. A few weeks later, I stood in the mirror and didn't recognize myself, in a good way. I looked leaner. Not athletic, just lighter. My eyes looked clearer. My jaw less tired. I had become a man again. Not her man. Just, a man. One who wasn't living in apology for the crime of needing affection. I still hadn't mentioned the post. We both pretended it had never happened. But every time she needed something and I didn't respond the way she expected, every time I declined, or forgot, or simply didn't offer, the silence between us whispered it louder than any argument could. You told the world I was disposable. Now you're watching me believe it. It's strange, watching someone try to unring a bell they were so proud to ring in the first place. She stopped posting for a while. No quotes. No curated feminism. No indirect declarations of independence. The energy shifted, not all at once, but in increments. Like she was testing the water, unsure of how cold it had become. She started being polite. That was new. Not affectionate. Not warm. Just careful. She'd ask me if I wanted anything from the store. She'd mention the weather. She cooked once or twice, then made a point to say, "There's extra in the fridge," like it was an offering. But I wasn't hungry anymore. Not for her food. Not for her company. Not for whatever version of her was trying to reassemble herself now that she realized I was no longer standing in the role she'd assigned to me. She asked one night if I had time to talk. I said I was tired. I was tired of pretending her damage was just miscommunication. Tired of filling in the emotional gaps so she could play the misunderstood wife while I quietly bled out behind the scenes. She lingered in the doorway of the living room, like she wanted to say more, like she wanted to apologize without saying the actual words. But that's the thing about certain kinds of people, they'll never apologize unless they're absolutely cornered. And I wasn't interested in building a corner for her to crawl into. I let the silence answer her. She eventually walked away. It was around that time she started losing control of the narrative, not just between us, but socially. People stopped engaging with her the same way. The comments on her posts became sparser. The likes fewer. Maybe her friends were busy. Or maybe, just maybe, the performative empowerment wasn't landing the way it used to. She tried a new angle, vulnerability. She shared something vague about feeling unseen and navigating a difficult chapter. Still no apology. Still no mention of the man quietly erasing her from his inner life. She wasn't looking for healing. She was looking for an audience. And I was no longer seated in the front row. I made more changes, all without drama. Started keeping a bag packed in the trunk of my car, gym gear, a few essentials, a spare charger. Just in case I wanted to sleep elsewhere one night and not come home. Not out of rage. Out of peace. The freedom in knowing I could leave and not feel like I was abandoning anything. I stopped contributing to her stability. Stopped reminding her to renew her car registration. Stopped answering questions she could Google. Stopped carrying the mental load she never acknowledged. I watched her stumble over the details. Double book appointments. Miss payment deadlines. I didn't gloat. I just observed. She had declared herself independent. I was simply respecting her wishes. Eventually, she snapped. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But one night, after dinner, we still ate separately, always. I found her standing in the hallway, arms crossed, blocking my way to the bedroom. She didn't yell. She just asked what was happening to us. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the panic underneath. I told her, without emotion, that nothing was happening to us. That was the point. She asked if I still loved her. I looked at her for a long moment. Not because I needed time to think, I didn't, but because I wanted her to feel the weight of what I wasn't going to say. Then I stepped past her and closed the door behind me. People think heartbreak is loud. It's not. Sometimes it's a series of small, quiet deaths. A post. A smirk. A dismissal. A laugh at your expense. A woman deciding you don't matter, and a man silently proving her right. She started waking up earlier. Maybe to catch me before I left for work. Maybe to see what I was doing with my time. I'd find her in the kitchen already dressed, stirring coffee she barely drank, pretending to read emails. But I didn't sit anymore. I didn't linger. My routines were no longer shared. I took my coffee in a thermos and left without conversation. The silence between us had become functional. No longer tense. Just vacant. That emptiness used to hurt me. Now it was oxygen. She began asking questions framed as casual check-ins. How's work? Are you okay? Is everything all right between us? But there was nothing between us anymore. No fire. No ice. Just air. And you can't rebuild on air. I didn't give her much. Not out of cruelty. Just out of instinct. I'd learned that the less I gave, the less she could weaponize. I wasn't punishing her. I was protecting myself. One night, she stood in the doorway of the spare bedroom, the one I now slept in, by quiet mutual agreement. She didn't knock. She just stood there with that look, the one she used when she wanted to seem soft, human, tender. She said she missed how things used to be. The words were heavy with nostalgia but hollow of accountability. She missed the man who did everything without asking why. She missed the emotional labor she never noticed. She missed the comfort, the effort, the invisible scaffolding of a man she never respected until he stopped playing the part. She didn't say any of that. But I heard it in what she didn't say. I started disappearing in small ways. I began meeting new people, not romantically, not yet, just people who didn't know me through her. I joined a book club at work. Went out for drinks on Fridays. Laughed more. Spoke more. Existed. The strange part? She noticed. She noticed when I shaved more often. When I came home smelling like cologne she didn't buy. When I no longer checked in with her about plans, because I didn't feel like I owed her an explanation anymore. That's when she tried to win me back. Not with words, but with presence. She started dressing nicer around the house. Cooking again. Lighting candles at dinner. But it was all performance. No substance. No reckoning. You can't fix a shattered mirror with better lighting. One evening, I came home and found the TV playing some movie we used to love. She was curled up on the couch, clearly waiting for me to join her. I walked past her. Went upstairs. Showered. Read a book. She didn't follow. She finally understood, I was no longer rejecting her. I had simply moved on, while standing right there in the same house. I checked my savings account that night. It was growing. Freedom, in dollars and cents. I started apartment hunting, nothing serious yet. Just keeping tabs. Reminding myself that escape wasn't just possible, it was a matter of time and decision. I didn't feel cruel. I felt calm. I felt like a man with a future again. One that no longer required her permission. A few days later, she posted another quote. This one in English. No translation needed. If he stops trying, he was never yours to begin with. I didn't react. I didn't flinch. I didn't even read the comments. Because I knew the truth. I had been hers. Fully. Painfully. Quietly. And she'd thrown that away, not in a single moment, but in a series of small betrayals she never thought would matter. Now she was left with the ghost of a man who once gave her everything. And I was standing in the light again. It didn't happen with a bang. No shouting match, no affair exposed, no suitcase hurled into the street. Just distance, accumulated, layered, undeniable. The kind of distance that doesn't close anymore. She kept trying to manufacture closeness. But it was like throwing water at dry concrete. Everything she did now felt like strategy, not connection. She offered to go with me to a work dinner, unprompted. It had been years since she showed any interest in my professional life. I declined. Politely. Without a reason. She texted me in the middle of the day, a photo of us from 5 years ago. Smiling. Laughing. A version of ourselves that had no idea what was coming. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry. Because there was nothing left to say to a version of her that no longer existed. She started talking about rebuilding. That word made me feel nothing. She hadn't apologized for the post. For the laughter. For the public display of contempt dressed as self-love. Instead, she talked around it. Pretended we just drifted. Pretended the damage wasn't deliberate. But I remembered. I remembered how quick she was to laugh when I asked why she'd posted it. How easily she dismissed my humiliation. How eager she was to get credit for independence, while still expecting me to carry the weight of our life. And now she wanted to rebuild. But you don't rebuild on scorched earth. I stopped sleeping in the house on weekends. Told her I was crashing with an old friend. That was true. Sometimes. Other times I got a cheap hotel room across town, ordered room service, and sat in bed with my laptop, feeling more at peace in a stranger's space than in the house I'd paid for. She didn't protest. She didn't ask where I went. But I could feel the fear rising in her. Not because she was losing me, but because she was no longer the one in control of how it looked. She couldn't frame it anymore. She couldn't post a quote and move on. Eventually, she stopped trying. She'd sit at the kitchen table with her phone and headphones in. She started leaving dishes in the sink again. Started staying out late without explanation. It was familiar. The passive version of war. The cold shoulder after all the heat is gone. I didn't respond. I simply began planning for after. The night I told her I wanted to separate, she didn't cry. She just sat still. Maybe she thought I'd never say it. Maybe she thought I was bluffing. Or maybe she already knew, and hearing it out loud just confirmed what her silence had already earned. I told her calmly, without blame, that I was done. That I wanted space. That we both deserved to live lives that didn't feel like a silent endurance test. She asked if there was someone else. There wasn't. There had been, once, but she killed him the night she laughed at me and posted a joke about denying me the most basic form of respect. That man wasn't coming back. The following morning, I started moving my things. She didn't help. She didn't ask me to stay. She just watched from the top of the stairs, arms crossed, phone in hand, like she was waiting for a punchline that never came. There was no fight. No final scene. Just two people standing in the ruins of a house they'd both abandoned long ago, one by neglect, the other by survival. People talk about closure like it's some grand conversation, a moment of mutual understanding and forgiveness. But mine came in the quiet. In the loading of a car. In the closing of a door. In the absence of one last word. The first night in my new place, I didn't sleep. Not from regret. Not from doubt. Just, overstimulation. The silence felt too loud. The ceiling too unfamiliar. The absence of her presence, even just her footsteps, the sound of the toilet flushing down the hall, her nightly cough, was disorienting. But beneath that, there was something else. Relief. The kind that doesn't come in a wave, but in tiny details. The ability to leave a sock on the floor without passive-aggressive commentary, to cook eggs at midnight without judgment, to exist without calculating someone else's reaction. I wasn't happy, exactly. But I was free. And that was enough. She texted me a few days later. Nothing dramatic. Just logistics. Something about the internet bill. I answered with short, clear sentences. No pleasantries. No punctuation that could be mistaken for warmth. She sent a second message, longer. Less practical. She said she was processing. That she didn't expect it to unravel this way. That she wished we could have talked more. I didn't respond. Not because I was bitter, but because I'd already talked. For years. Through actions. Through silence. Through every unacknowledged effort that she had mistaken for obligation. I had talked enough. I started rebuilding slowly. But this time, it was for me. I got a new bank account. Bought furniture that didn't match anything we used to own. A small couch. A desk. A lamp I'd always liked but she said was too cold. I bought it anyway. I began sleeping through the night. I cooked for myself, nothing fancy, but enough to remind me I was capable. I stopped checking her social media. Not out of discipline, but because I no longer cared what she posted. She could quote as many mantras as she wanted. Her audience could clap. I was no longer in the room. I met people. Slowly. Cautiously. At the gym. Through mutual friends. Not romantically, not yet, but socially. I laughed more. Not performative chuckles. Real ones. The kind that come from being around people who don't expect you to apologize for existing. I started reading again. Books that had been sitting on shelves for years, collecting dust in a house where I never had the mental space. I remembered who I was. Not the man she made me into, quiet, careful, invisible. The man I was before all that. I think the hardest part wasn't leaving her. It was leaving the version of myself that thought love meant sacrifice without acknowledgement. I used to believe that being a good man meant showing up, no matter how little you were seen. Carrying the weight, fixing the problems, saying, "I'm fine," even when you were bleeding internally. She never hit me. Never screamed. Never cheated, as far as I know. But she made a life where I had to disappear to keep the peace. And one day, I stopped disappearing. That was the day I became a man again. About a month after I left, I got a letter in the mail. Her handwriting. No envelope. Just folded notebook paper, taped shut. It wasn't long. Barely a page. No apology. No plea. Just a sentence that stayed with me. "I didn't think you'd actually leave." And that was the problem. She'd built her entire identity on the belief that I never would. That I was permanent. Predictable. Endless. And now she was alone with the echo of a laugh she'd let the whole world hear, the same laugh that told me everything I needed to know. Time passes differently after you walk away from someone who thought you'd stay forever. The days didn't get easier, they just stopped asking questions I no longer needed to answer. I woke up. I went to work. I came home. And somewhere in that routine, I started liking myself again. Not loving. That comes later, I think. But I no longer looked in the mirror and saw a man who let himself be reduced. That was enough for now. She reached out a few more times. Mostly through text. One email. One voicemail, her voice quiet, almost childlike, asking if we could talk sometime. I never blocked her. I just didn't respond. Because at some point, closure becomes self-respect. And the door she wanted to re-enter was no longer a door, just a wall she built herself. I started seeing someone. Months later. Nothing serious at first. She laughed at my jokes. Asked questions and actually listened to the answers. When we went out, she walked beside me, not ahead or behind. She didn't make me feel like I had to earn her decency. It was strange at first, being treated like I mattered. Stranger still that I hadn't realized how long it had been since I felt that way. I heard from mutual friends that Marcy was struggling. Apparently, she'd been telling people the breakup had blindsided her. That I changed overnight. That she was doing her best to heal. I didn't correct the record. I didn't explain. Let her have her version. I didn't need anyone to know what really happened. I knew. And that was enough. One night, I drove past our old street. Not on purpose, I just happened to be nearby. My chest didn't tighten. My stomach didn't flip. I didn't feel much of anything, really. Just a memory. A chapter. A house where a man disappeared piece by piece, and one day, quietly walked out whole. I'm not angry anymore. Not even hurt. What she did, that post, that laugh, that refusal to see me, it no longer defines anything. It was just the moment I stopped lying to myself. The moment I realized that love without respect is just a slow death. That being quiet to keep the peace isn't noble, it's erasure. That no matter how much you give, some people will always believe they're owed more. And that when someone shows you they're willing to humiliate you in front of an audience, you don't clap back. You leave the stage. I still think about her sometimes. Not with longing. Just curiosity. Who she is now. If she's still performing. If she still thinks strength means never having to say sorry. But those thoughts pass quickly. Because now, I have a life. Not a perfect one. Not some fairy tale. Just a life where I don't flinch when my phone buzzes. Where my presence is a choice, not a convenience. Where I can say no. Where I can say enough. Where I don't owe anyone the destruction of myself just to prove I'm good. That's my story. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just true. And sometimes that's the most powerful kind.